This is Canadian Politic. Today we're going to get into the Ontario teacher strike, exactly what led to this disaster, and what we can do to prevent this in the future. Get ready for a riveting show. Well, looks like it's really getting out of hand. The problem with the unions here is they're just not addressing three major key issues. Number one, the province is in a lot of debt. Number two, education spending has been going up. In the last 13 years, it went up about $10 billion. And number three, Ontario teachers are already some of the most well paid. So really, how much more do they want?
I want, me.
So now we're going to get into a step-by-step analysis on exactly why these three issues are important and what they're going to mean for us. So buckle up, it's going to be a ride.
Buckle up, buckaroo!
Number one, Ontario's debt crisis. First key issue that we're going to address here at the Canadian Politic is that currently Ontario is in a major debt crisis. Right now we're an estimated $352 billion in debt. That's estimated to go up $360 billion this year. Last year we had a deficit of about $7.4 billion. Right now to service this $352 billion debt, it costs about $13.3 billion annually. So this is money that could be used for other services, but yet we have to use it to service our debt. This is absolutely imperative that we change this around. And the main reason for this is because the public sector has essentially outpaced the private sector. They have to correlate with one another. You can't have the public sector outgrow the private sector because it is the private sector that pays for these services. I feel as though this is the Santa Claus generation with no real understanding of how these services are afforded. They're not just growing money trees and picking maple leaves and paying for these services. It doesn't work like that. It's checks and balances that ensure that the government's able to provide service for its citizens. Now we're going to dive into analysis conducted by the Fraser Institute. We got the analysis conducted by the Fraser Institute. Again, it's public and private sector employment trends in Canada between the years 1990 and 2013. So what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to the executive summary here. So we can see here that public sector employment trends actually declined during the early 1990s. And then coming into the first decade of the 21st century, again, public sector employment starts increasing. The reason why this happened, they decreased the public sector employment in the 1990s, was because it was an era of large government deficits, debt, and then fiscal restraint. All we need to do is scroll down to the bottom of the analysis. This is page 10. And we got a table here that presents the percentage point difference in the growth rate between public and private sector employment between 2003 to 2013 period, ranked from highest to lowest. Now, this is the list that you don't want to be at the top of. You can see Ontario public sector employment grew a whopping 27.6%, while private sector only grew a mere 5.6%. It's growth and innovation in the private sector that's absolutely necessary for a strong public sector. And this is a key indicator of why we've been increasing debt in the manner that we have. So historically speaking, it's really not a big surprise that the Ford government be trying to reduce spending. During times of debt, high deficit, this is what governments do. They reduce the public sector employment. So for a sustainable future, this is something we absolutely need to do. Unfortunately, the unions do not want to work with the Ford government, and they just want more and more and more. And it's absolutely imperative for the government to control public sector wages if they expect their deficit reduction plans to work. We got an article here conducted by the Fraser Institute. If we scroll down, we can see here that last year our deficit was clocked in at $7.4 billion. And that's 12 straight years that we're in the red in Ontario. And now our deficit stands at a whopping $24,000 per person. And the government's ability to shrink deficit over time will largely hinge on its ability to control the compensation of government employees. And a recent study in Fraser Institute suggests that there is room for savings in this area. This is because government sector employees enjoy a wage premium of 10.3% compared to the similar workers in the private sector. Of course, it's absolutely important for the government to be a good employer and competitive on compensation to attract and retain talented people to deliver high quality government services. However, decisions about hiring and compensation levels also must be done with an eye on Ontario's challenging fiscal circumstances. So the only way to really resolve this issue with the government debt is to reduce restrictions and regulations on business. This will allow the private sector to grow. That way we can maintain the level of services that we have. It's absolutely irresponsible for a government to incur debt to begin with because it's just a band-aid solution. Eventually, the chickens will come home to roost, and when that happens, that means you're going to be taking away services from people who really need it. And that's exactly what's happening with the education. Everybody obviously really depends on this, but now we've hit this level of debt. Now you're going to see some people affected with services being taken away. So again, the best way to tackle this debt is to return spending to sustainable levels and at the same time allow private industry to grow. That way they can create the revenue required to pay for these services. Now that brings us to the next issue that the teachers and unions are missing. Number 2, education spending has been increasing. And another one of the key issues that the unions just seem to be ignoring altogether is that, guess what? Education spending has been going up, and it's been going up exponentially. You figure by the way they're talking that spending has been decreasing, but that's just not the case. And we know this because the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy of the University of Ottawa, they conducted a study. They found back in 2005 education spending was just under $18 billion. Now you fast forward to 2018, it's just under $28 billion. So that means it went up $10 billion in about 13 years. And the most startling thing is that student body went down. So what gives? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a study conducted by the IFSD and see what they have to say about this. So what I have here is the study conducted by the IFSD. They do a real great job in breaking down education spending for the province of Ontario. So if you ever want to take a look at this yourself, you can just go online and obviously take a gander. So here we got the chart. So this is where I got my numbers from. So 2005 education spending was just under 18 billion. Again, we fast forward to 2018 and it's just under 28 billion. So obviously, according to the study, education spending has been increasing. It's been increasing exponentially. So it's not entirely unreasonable for the Ford government to want to reduce spending. They act like it's absolutely obscene. It's something that can't be done. Well, I'm sorry, but it has to be done. If we want our future generations to still have these services, well, then we're going to have to bring down spending. We're going to have to reduce public employment. And I'm sorry, but teachers are public employees. So if we can no longer meet the obligations of our fiscal responsibilities, then I'm sorry, we're going to have to let some people go. And that's all there is to it. And the only way to really counteract that, to ensure that people can still educate their children, is to bring in more options for parents, like independent schools. We're going to get into more on that in just a second. Stay tuned. So if we scroll down to the bottom of the study conducted by the IFSD, we can see what they forecast the student population to be in the next 40 years. So right now we're sitting at about roughly 2 million, and they forecast it to be about 2.7 million by the year 2063, which big deal and everything, right? But let's scroll down to the bottom and see what that means for terms of spending. So if we go under current spending projections, so if we continually increase the amount of spending at the percentages that has been increased in the last 10 years, this is the projection they got for the next 40 years. We can see how much it goes up. It goes up to just under $150 billion. Which, if we had the student body growth to correlate with that, that'd be okay. But the student population doesn't even double. And we can see here that the spending is expected to be 5 times what it is today. So you can see what will happen if we don't try to bring down spending. It's absolutely necessary. This is unsustainable, and we will not be able to maintain this. So by what we're looking at here, the teachers and unions can't even do simple math. The education spending just keeps increasing. The government debt, sky high. A deficit, it's out of control. So we need to change this. We absolutely need a fiscally sustainable future for our future generations. So that brings us to the final issue that the unions are ignoring. Number 3, Ontario teachers are already well paid. And the other thing that's just absolutely irritating me about the Ontario teacher strike is that they're some of the most well paid. Their benefits are among the best in Canada compared to their provincial counterparts. But no, now they want to go to phase 6 of strikes. And these strike phases mean absolutely nothing to no one. Means nothing to the students. Means nothing to the parents. Means nothing to the taxpayers. The only person that actually understands what these phases mean is Sam Hammond, Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. You can almost see him like Dr. Evil, like, we're now in phase 6. And the way they're justifying these strikes is saying that they're defending the future for our children. But that's just not the case. And the Ford government, he called them on their bluff. He did this by backing down. He said, okay, that's fine. We'll go back down to 23 students. We'll take away the online learning. Still, unions won't even come to the table. So really, they're the ones that don't want to negotiate. So in the end, it's just about money and union membership. All we have to do is go to the Statistics Canada website, and we can see the average salary for every teacher in Canada, province by province. We can see the starting wage for the average teacher in Canada, or for Ontario, it's about average, about 6th or 7th. However, for a tenured Ontario teacher, they're the second highest paid in the country. So it's a bit of a stretch to say that they're unfairly paid. Here at Canadian Politic, mind my French, we like to cut the bullshit. And we do that by gathering information from various think tanks throughout the country. And not only do we like to give you the problem, but we're also going to provide you with a solution. So here it goes. So the reason why the unions are capable of holding our kids hostage is because the public institutions essentially hold a monopoly on education within Ontario. 95% of students in Ontario receive education from a public institution. We're the only province that actually doesn't invest in independent schools. So the only way I think we could actually come at the unions would be to have a voucher system, which would reimburse parents who chose an independent school over a public institution. Essentially, the government would cover the entire cost. And I think that's how we can start to branch away from the public institutions. That way, at the same time, we can still maintain a universal education system for everybody. What this will do, this will give parents more choice. It will allow them to find a school that actually meets the needs of their child. This will particularly help those who have children with disabilities. And yeah, that's the best way to go about this. And to bring down spending within Ontario education, independent schools would really be the answer. If we look at our friends in British Columbia, this is exactly what they have done. The way their system works is that the provincial government covers half the tuition. So parents who wouldn't be able to otherwise afford it, they now can. So what this does, this relieves the public institutions and actually leaves more resources for those students who need it more. And while those students who are in independent schools, they only have to pay half the tuition, which would cost for their public school counterparts. So really, it saves the province a lot of money to have these independent schools. So if we follow British Columbia, Ontario likewise would be able to bring down spending. The reason why Ontario unions are so powerful is because the monopoly they get to enjoy. So the only way to combat that is to bring in the invisible hand of the market economy for Ontario education. They'll bring in competition, it'll improve services, it'll improve education. Really, if the unions were fighting for the future of our children, the sustainability, these are kind of the points that they'd be bringing up. But what I find is a lot of teachers share mostly left-wing views, and they think that the government should be providing everything. But according to the IFSD, if we look at the charts they're providing us, that spending is going to absolutely skyrocket. So if we want to be leaders, if we want to be responsible, this is something we absolutely have to take care of. And again, these are non-profit independent schools. I don't think I brought that up. These are absolutely non-profit schools in British Columbia. And they're able to significantly bring down the spending because it only costs the province half the amount to educate these children who otherwise would be in the public institutions, thus taking resources from the other students. So really, this is a win-win situation for everybody. It gives parents more choice, it'll help us bring down our deficit, and it'll improve schooling for children. So really, it's the only way to go. And I just want to say one thing. I apologize for the rough hair. Unfortunately, I didn't want to get ready after getting done work. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. From everyone at Canadian Politic, I hope you all have a great night. Good night.